Joe Biden is complicit in Iran's attack on Israel, and folks, brace yourself, it's about to get much worse. All right, folks, let's get into this one. I got to tell you, there is a lot going on, and it just seems as though it isn't stopping. It is getting faster, and things are ramping up. Now, as you know, Iran has attacked Israel. We know this, of course. It's unprecedented how that attack actually happened, because for the first time ever in the relationship between Israel and Iran in the modern day, since the reestablishment of the nation of Israel, Iran actually attacked Israel without the use of its proxies. It did it directly. Now, we've done a lot of coverage on this. We've also done a lot of analysis on this, and I've provided quite a bit of material for you guys to kind of give you a better understanding. We've done some live shows on this. I actually, as a matter of fact, the day before yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, we did a video that even talks about the implications that some people think that this may have on the rapture and what the biblical perspective is. We've done a lot of that stuff. But what is even more crazy than the actual attack of Iran on Israel is what I'm actually watching happening right now. And what we're seeing here is absolutely insane. Now, the day that I'm recording this video, it is Monday, the 15th. Yes, it's tax day. You're probably watching this on either Saturday or Sunday, so 5 or 6 days later. But I'm absolutely mind-boggled by the fact that the prime minister of Iraq is sitting down right now with the president of the United States, by the way, at the invitation of the president of the United States. Now, some people might actually argue, well, he was invited prior to the time that this attack had taken place, and you would be correct. As a matter of fact, he was invited even before Israel actually chose to launch the airstrike against Iran on April the 1st. But when all of this happened, the United States of America should have walked away from continuing on with this meeting and should simply have declared that there are war issues at hand that they have to deal with. But Joe Biden is bringing more judgment on the United States of America by the insanity that he's doing. Now, some of you might say, well, James, what are the implications of the idea that the prime minister of Iraq is being invited and having a conversation with Joe Biden? Well, there are a lot of things at bay here. There's a lot of things to talk about. But let me do this. There is an article that I would like to read to you because I think it puts the issues through very, very well. It is dated April 15th, so it's a little earlier than the time that you're actually watching this, but it is a very, very good article. I'm going to read this to you and follow along with me because this is important. And some of the things that are said here are quite astute, by the way, very astute, these observations. So let me start off with the article. It says this. It says, while Israel decides its next steps in responding to Iran's unprecedented attack over the weekend, the White House welcomed, yes, folks, welcomed Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani. His visit took place Monday in the Oval Office, where he sat down with President Joe Biden to discuss the U.S. mission in Iraq. By the way, discussing the U.S. mission in Iraq in and of itself is an absolutely absurd idea, especially in context of what has happened over the last few days. This is evidence of the fact that the United States of America has an absolutely terrible leader. Now, we've already gone over the implications of this. If you watch the Rush video that I did yesterday, or maybe in the day before yesterday, you can see that Joe Biden was prompted, basically, he was propped up to be the type of leader that would take instruction from those that are protesting and demanding and would be ruled quite well like a puppet by the deep state and everybody else that's involved. So we know what's going on here. We know that Joe Biden is in essence an empty shell. So none of this should surprise us. But this is just crazy. I mean, this is literally the United States of America, forgive me for using this terminology, just pooping all over itself, right? It's absolutely nuts, okay? Let me read on what this paragraph says. It says, unfortunately, this invitation to Washington only rewards al-Sudani and his Iranian backers while alienating key partners in the region. And that is absolutely true. They are alienating a whole bunch of people. They're alienating, believe it or not, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, that just stuck their neck out to add to Israel's security, which, by the way, let me make myself very, very clear, was in the interests of the United States of America as well. And there's a lot more to say about this, because when you start talking about the implications of what's happening in Iraq, then it is going to bear a tremendous amount of significance on the Persian Gulf, specifically Kuwait and many of the areas south of that as you go around the lip of the Persian Gulf. It is really, really interesting to see how it's going to affect the Arabian Peninsula, specifically when we talk about the Arabian Peninsula, when we talk about the more southern and eastern portion of it, when we get into Dubai, the UAE, and all of these other countries. So there's a lot that this affects for a lot of different reasons, and we'll probably do some analysis on this a little bit later as we can get into the enhanced picture of what's going on geopolitically, especially as it relates to Iraq. There's a lot of stuff happening here. So let me go on to read this article. It says House and Senate Republicans are not happy about the visit. In a March 28th letter to Biden, lawmakers called out the administration for inviting al-Sudani, stating, this is the quote, the Iraqi government provides some $3 billion per year to the Iranian-backed Popular Mobilization Forces militias, including 4 U.S. designated terrorist groups. And by the way, that is absolutely true. There are a ton of designated terrorist groups that Iraq continues to fund. And by the way, Iran provides that money where that funding is taking place. And it is absolutely absurd, right? It's absolutely absurd. And by the way, it's interesting because there's like this loop of insanity that exists with this, because what's happening is we as taxpayers are giving that money, or actually our money is being given. We're not giving it to them. That money is being given to Iran, and the vicious cycle continues to circle. And it's really, really crazy. Don't even get me started, by the way. This is really important. Don't even get me started on what happened with Russia when we actually sanctioned Russia, because when we sanctioned Russia, we actually made Russia a whole lot more wealthy, as well as Iran. Because what we did when we sanctioned Russia as part of this weird, twisted version of a modified JCPOA is we told Russia that they could be the designated people that help Iran build safe nuclear facilities that don't actually involve the weaponization of nuclear capacity, but rather the use of the harnessing of energy in the region, which of course we know is just a bunch of just hogwash. It's just ridiculous. It's like giving the sheep to the wolves and basically saying, who cares? It doesn't even matter. So you can understand why many Senate Republicans are pretty upset by all of this, because this is the United States continuing to feed into the terrorist machine that continues to create all kinds of havoc, not just around the Middle East, but we're even seeing it here in the United States of America and in many other parts of the world. So this is really, really crazy. Let me go on to read this. It says, since October the 7th, these proxies have targeted American troops more than 165 times. Yes, folks, 165 times in retaliation for its support of Israel. One of those attacks tragically killed 4 U.S. servicemen and injured 40 others on the Jordanian border with Syria on January the 28th. And folks, we talked about that extensively in one of our live shows, and we talked about the significance of this nonsense that we are continuing to see as it's manifesting its just terribly ugly face, right? And by the way, what's even crazier than that is that the United States continues to fund and back the people that continue to endanger its own troops, right? And this is a lot related to what we're seeing in the State Department and all the other foolishness that we're observing happening right now. It's absolutely crazy. Look what this goes on to say. It says 2 days after the January 28th attack in Jordan that killed 4 U.S. troops, Iranian-backed Khatib Hezbollah said that it would suspend its attacks on U.S. bases. Here's the quote, in order to prevent embarrassment to the Iraqi government. Now, this action was only after a visit to Baghdad by Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps leader Ismail Qaani. By the way, the discussion about what Ismail Qaani did is a very, very involved one, and one that, I mean, really, if you think about this, involves some real time to discuss the complexities of what that actually means for the region and how Iraq is affected by it, and of course, Iran. So there's some very important stuff here, and al-Sudani, who's the prime minister, of course, of Iraq, has a massive fingerprint on all of this, by the way. So this is absolutely crazy. So look at the next paragraph. It says, well, al-Sudani treads carefully not to upset his Iranian backers, the Iraqi government is doing everything it can to consolidate power over all of Iraq in Baghdad. Over the past year, the federal courts in Iraq have slowly chipped away at Kurdish political control over the autonomous Kurdish region in northern Iraq, which, by the way, creates a massive problem because the Kurds in northern Iraq have created, I'm not going to call it somewhat of a stopgap, but it has created a bit of a DMZ, for lack of a better term, for what could become a very dangerous scenario in Iraq for a lot of reasons. By the way, when you start getting into Kuwait and the discussion of Kuwait with respect to its relationship to Iraq, and then you start getting into some of the initiatives that Iraq has been taking in order to bring in more conferences of people that might be sympathetic towards their cause, we are looking at what could be the formation of a modern day Babylon. There's a lot to say about that, but we'll save that for a different time because there's just a lot here. So here's the next paragraph. It says, in separate rulings, the court reduced the number of parliamentary seats for the Kurds, blocked the Kurdish export of oil via the Iraq-Turkey pipeline, and withheld public sector salaries to the north. The Iraqi Kurds are close U.S. partners that host the majority of the 2,500 U.S. troops stationed in Iraq as part of the global coalition to defeat ISIS, which, by the way, this is a big deal. And this is why so many people are just absolutely shocked, because the position of Iraq under the leadership of the current prime minister is in essence to destroy any influence of the Kurds and eventually destroy the Kurds. And al-Sudani is not being apologetic about his position with respect to that. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the interaction with the Kurds that we have as the United States of America functions as a bit of, like I said, a buffer zone to keep or maintain stability in that section or in that region, and eventually to keep things from going to the level of a rogue state like what we see with Iran. So this is all major stuff. And notice this, folks, this is the thing that we're seeing, and no one should be surprised with this, okay? The president is sabotaging our nation, okay? How in the world are you having this guy sitting with you in the White House, in the Oval Office, while Israel isn't even interacting with the president at this high of a level, right? It's crazy. Look at the next paragraph. It says, while the Biden administration has made statements of support, Biden didn't meet with Massoudi Barzani, prime minister of the autonomous Kurdish region, during his February visit to Washington. Of course he's not going to meet with him. The funny thing about this is the reason why his handlers won't let him meet with the Kurdish prime minister is because, by the way, a lot of people get offended when he's referred to as the prime minister. I'm just doing it for the effect, right? But think about this for a second. Joe Biden won't meet with him because it's going to have the same effect as him gathering together with a leader in Taiwan, right? It's the same kind of thing, except it is the right thing to do, especially because it's the Kurds that is functioning as a sort of housing facility for the position that we have of U.S. troops. It's a very, very, it's not even a fine line, folks. It's very obvious what's going on. If we're going to be successful in making sure that ISIS doesn't have a resurrection of sorts, then our position to northern Iraq is critical. And the more we begin to allow this type of thing to happen with the Kurds, we are going to create the type of situation that we know will end up becoming the next Afghanistan. We need to wake up to this, folks. Like, it's a major deal. So Joe Biden is creating, in essence, an Afghanistan 2.0. And when that happens in Iraq, it's going to be very ugly because of the people that it ends up eliminating, including our own troops. So we have to think about this stuff, guys. I mean, look, I despise the people who continue to try to lie to us and tell us that Joe Biden is not the president of wars, that he has prevented so many wars that Donald Trump was actually creating. I am telling you guys, we need to pray like we've never prayed before for Donald Trump, that he will change his mind regarding this issue of abortion, because I am telling you, he will go down as one of the best presidents we have ever had in the United States of America, especially because of the understanding that he has of the region geopolitically as it relates to the Middle East, and because of the fact that he's one of the few presidents that we have had that has kept war from just literally setting ablaze all over the world. We are literally, according to the definition of a world war, we are in World War III right now. And so much of that was not related to Joe Biden not doing anything. So much of that was related to the things that Joe Biden did under his ridiculous and incompetent State Department. And actually, I probably shouldn't say incompetent State Department. What I should actually say is that Antony Blinken has been very intentional about how he leads the State Department, because he himself is led by terrorist interests, okay? And I'm just going to make myself very clear there. Some people might take exception to me making that statement, but you should start looking at some of the characters that are his higher level operatives that sit within the State Department, and it'll begin to make a whole lot of sense what you're actually looking at. And this is major, folks. This is not minor. This is major, okay? Look at what it goes on to say. It says the Kurds' cooperation with the United States has made them a target for Iran and its proxies. In the last year, Erbil has faced a barrage of missile and drone attacks by Iranian proxies, including a ballistic missile attack in January that killed 4 civilians and injured 6 others, which, by the way, we didn't even talk about that when it happened. And I probably should have spent some time talking about it because of the far and wide implications that creates for our position as the United States of America in that region, and actually for Russia, for that matter, for more reasons than I care to talk about at this current moment because of the time that we have in this video that we're producing, and I don't want to just run down a bunch of rabbit trails that are going to take our focus off of the issue at hand. So look what the article continues to say. It says the Kurds are not the only target for Baghdad. The Iraqi government has also cracked down on Christian groups, and that is true. Last July, Iraq's president effectively removed the top Christian leader in Iraq in order to hand over the church's extensive property holdings to an Iranian-backed militia leader, the U.S. sanctioned in 2019. And by the way, that is something that they have been doing very methodically, okay? Taking assets away from Christians and Christian-held positions and giving it to terrorists. And by the way, Iranian terrorists. And this is something that's been happening. This is the guy that's meeting in the White House with President Biden at President Biden's invitation. Think about that for a second, folks. Let's continue on with the article. It says, while Iran gains ground in Iraq, the Biden administration turns a blind eye because it's desperate to keep the situation calm. Knowing this, al-Sudani was likely to drive a hard bargain in Washington. The 3 issues at the top of the agenda were expected to be U.S. troop presence, U.S. basing, and U.S. sanctions. Why? Because al-Sudani wants to remove the presence of United States soldiers and Marines and so on and so forth. He does not want U.S. troops because just the very presence of U.S. troops will cause Iran to function in a very limited manner, because Iran itself does not want to enter into a situation where the United States may have to react. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but there are still some things that are being held at bay, even if our military is weakening by the day, okay? So it's very important. It goes on to say, on February the 2nd, the U.S. military carried out a series of strikes in Syria and Iraq in response to the January 28th attack in Jordan, reigniting long-standing calls in Baghdad for the withdrawal of U.S. troops, characterizing the strike as a blatant aggression that violates Iraqi sovereignty. Al-Sudani will use the visit to put pressure on the Biden administration to set a timeline for an eventual U.S. exit. In other words, what Al-Sudani wants is he wants an Afghanistan 2.0. I'm telling you this right now. That's exactly what he wants. Al-Sudani may have asked the Biden administration to ease sanctions on blacklisted Iraqi banks. The sanctions were triggered when 14 Iraqi banks were caught last year siphoning off U.S. currency and channeling those funds to Iran, Syria, and Russia. And by the way, there's a lot of people that believe that the United States of America actually encouraged that activity as a way of secretly, on the down low, funding these countries in hopes that these countries would walk cooperatively with the United States of America and their stated intentions or goal for how they look to the international community. And by the way, that's probably what was happening. Now, conceding to the demands would grant more financial power to Iran at a critical time in the region, and that is absolutely true. Israel must be having a conniption with this meeting. It's clear that al-Sudani and the Iraqi government in Baghdad are not good faith partners for the United States, but only political puppets that sit atop an Iranian money laundering operation. And folks, that is true. Let me finish this article. It says, yet Iraq's entire economy is propped up by the stability of its currency being tied to the US dollar. The Iraqi government has more than $100 billion in reserves in the United States from oil revenues and relies on Washington to access those funds. The US provides billions of dollars of aid. Since 2014, Congress has appropriated more than $7.7 billion to train and equip Iraqi forces and an additional $13.9 billion in foreign assistance. Inviting al-Sudani to the White House will only spell more trouble for the Biden administration and will do nothing to address the true threat to the region, which is Iran. And by the way, I want to make something very, very clear with respect to the idea that we've been spending all kinds of money on equipping these people. This is the problem with nation building. Because when you come in, this all goes back to Desert Storm. When we came in, because of the problem that surfaced with Kuwait and Iraq and all the different things that happened and the play that we made for money and Desert Shield and all of those operations that took place, we literally put ourselves in Iraq and we created for ourselves a much more significant problem than we could have ever imagined because we took on the role and responsibility that we were never intended to take on. And we did that at the expense of the safety and security of American citizens and at the expense of the economy of the American people. And it's very, very important that we understand it, right? And I love the commentary that this woman leaves at the end of her article. She says the administration should focus on strengthening its partnership with the Kurds in Erbil and use its monetary leverage to punish Baghdad's complicity in Iran's regional pressure campaign. But you want to know why that's not going to happen? It's not going to happen because for some reason, the Biden regime is stone cold slammed on the idea that they need to destroy the United States of America in order to maintain some weird semblance of power that they think that they can better have when that happens. Folks, I want to make myself very clear. This stuff is intentional. There's a reason why in Bible prophecy, we do not see the United States of America being mentioned. I believe it's becoming inconsequential by the moment. And I guarantee you that the things that we are learning about, especially in Iraq and what's going on in the north with the Kurds and what's happening to the south in Kuwait and all of the things that are happening in the region, especially in the Persian Gulf, are prime indicators of massive changes that are about to take place, not only in the country, but in Iran, which is adjacent to that area. By the way, I should also point this out and make myself very, very clear. People ask me all the time, what is Babylon? What is Babylon? What is Babylon in Bible prophecy? And I say the same thing. It is Babylon, okay? And we are talking about Iraq, which is why we need to be paying attention. We need to keep our eyes open and focusing on what's going on in Iraq because there are so many things that are about to happen. Remember, folks, Syria gets affected by Iraq. Turkey gets affected. Iran gets affected. Yes, Afghanistan and even Pakistan get affected. Kuwait gets affected. Jordan gets affected. Certainly Saudi Arabia gets affected. Look, if you were to just look at the countries that bordered Iraq in and of itself, you're talking about Kuwait, you're talking about Saudi Arabia, you're talking about Jordan, you're talking about Syria, you're talking about Iran, and yes, even Turkey. So all of these nations are going to be affected by what centralizes in Iraq. And when you start looking at the northern portion where the Kurds are that run up against that area of Turkey, folks, it can get very complicated and very crazy very quickly. When Iraq begins to shift the way that they are seeking to shift, it is going to shift the geopolitics of the region very, very quickly. By the way, I haven't even mentioned what the implications could potentially be with Azerbaijan and, of course, Armenia. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on here. The bottom line of everything that I just did in this video is to tell you to keep your eyes open. Study the Word of God, understand the geopolitical implications of the very things that we're seeing. And guess what, folks? Get ready. Things are about to change, and they are changing more rapidly than we think because the world is changing quickly. God's word is always true and always proves to be accurate. So get into it, keep your head up, and recognize things are about to change quickly, and God's word will never change. There it is. God bless you guys.